Hi friends. Tonight, as the firelight flickers softly on the worn stones of a castle wall, let me take you on a journey into a chapter of history many rarely speak of, and fewer still understand in its full, shadowed depth. We're venturing into the quiet, cold corridors of medieval torture chambers, not to frighten, but to illuminate. Through these softly spoken words, I invite you to step into a world that once existed beneath the floorboards of castles and within the stony hearts of dungeons, a world where justice had a different shape, where mercy was a fragile candle, flickering in the wind of power and fear. In this first part, we will not dive into the harsher scenes, not yet. Instead, we shall gently open the ancient wooden door of context and peer inside. Let us first understand why such chambers came to be and what they say about the world that built them. In the Middle Ages, justice was not a matter of black robes and orderly trials. No, it was a living beast, a thing of whispers, of customs, of religion, and of rule. It roamed freely in village, halls, monastic cloisters, and castle basements. Justice was entwined with punishment, and punishment was often public, ritualized, and fearsome. But how did one even begin to measure truth in a time when science had not yet taken root, and belief guided nearly every hand? Imagine, if you will, a small village tucked in the green folds of 13th century England. The sun sets early in winter, and the townsfolk gather in the hall, where the reeve or local lord holds court. There are murmurs of theft, a scythe gone, missing, a chicken that did not belong to the man who now eats it. Witnesses step forward, but their words are uncertain. No one is quite sure. In such moments, the medieval world had methods, some strange, some solemn, for drawing truth from uncertainty. Among these methods were the so-called ordeals, trials not of the mind, but of the flesh and spirit. A man might carry a burning iron a measured distance. If the wound healed cleanly after 3 days, it was deemed God's sign of innocence. If not, well, God had spoken. It was a time when pain was seen not as a punishment alone, but as a path to truth. And thus, slowly, painfully, the chambers beneath castles were born. But these were not all crude dungeons with rats and rust. No. Some were quiet stone rooms built by monks who believed truly that through suffering, a soul might be cleansed, a truth revealed. In cloisters where chants echoed and incense drifted, a different kind of torment was sometimes visited upon the penitent. A spiritual cleansing, they called it. And so the torture chamber became, in many places, an instrument of justice, or, rather, of the beliefs that justice rode upon. Now, picture yourself in that era, not as a noble or a knight, but as someone ordinary, a tailor perhaps, or a washerwoman. You hear rumours of a chamber beneath the keep. Some say it holds chains. Others whisper of devices with names like the rack or the pyre. But to you, it is a place far away, until the day a neighbour accuses you of blasphemy or sorcery or theft. Then the chamber becomes real. But before we reach such devices, before the tools are named and their uses told, we must understand the silence of these rooms. For they were not always loud with screams. Often the fear was quiet, a dampness in the stone, a smell of old iron, a torch that casts one too many shadows. The torturers themselves were not wild-eyed villains. They were often trained, methodical, even deeply religious. Some prayed before beginning their work. Others wore hoods, not for secrecy, but for solemnity. Their task, they believed, was not to hurt, but to reveal truth, to protect the community, to serve the divine order. Yet even in this belief, there is unease, is there not? For what kind of truth is wrung from flesh and fear? In these chambers, the line between justice and cruelty blurred like ink on damp parchment. And now you may begin to sense why, dear friend, even a single day within such a place would be unbearable to us now, not merely for the pain, but for the silence. for the way the world outside forgets you the moment the door closes, for the cold belief that suffering is holy. But tonight, we rest in this prelude. We do not yet descend into the full catalogue of torments. That will come. For now, we rest our thoughts in the candle-lit corners of an old truth, that justice, in the medieval mind, was less about fairness and more about fear. And so I ask you, as the embers glow faintly and the world outside grows quiet, can you feel the weight of that old silence? Can you imagine the candle guttering beside a wooden chair far below the banquet halls? Next time, we will step deeper. We will meet the first device, the rack, and learn why it became a symbol feared across Europe. Until then, sleep well and dream of gentler times. The fire is soft tonight, low and steady. Shadows stretch across the stone floor like slow-moving spectres, and the wind murmurs gently through the cracks of old castle walls. Welcome back, dear friend. I am grateful you've returned for another chapter. Let us continue then, downward still, into the deeper chambers of medieval memory, where stone does not forget and silence often has teeth. Tonight, we speak of the rack. Among all the devices forged in the twilight of medieval justice, few have inspired such a blend of dread and fascination. The rack was not subtle. It did not pretend to be merciful. It was built with a clear purpose, to unravel the body, and perhaps in doing so, to reveal the secrets buried deep within the soul. Let us begin not with its mechanics, but with the mind that conceived it. You see, in a time when truth was a matter of divine judgment and fear was as common as bread, pain was seen as a purifier, a tool to coax honesty from the unwilling. The rack, in this cruel logic, was a vessel of revelation, an altar of flesh where the truth might be bled free. Picture the chamber. It is cool and dim, lit only by a few torches set in iron sconces. The air smells faintly of old sweat and damp stone. In the center stands the device, long and low, like a banquet table for giants. It is crafted of sturdy wood, reinforced with iron. At each end, large spindled rollers wait, ready to be turned. From them stretch ropes, coarse, unkind ropes, meant for wrists and ankles. The accused, no matter their standing, would be laid upon it, arms and legs bound. The room would fall silent, save for the creak of leather, the slow breath of the inquisitor, and the faint scrape of parchment as a scribe prepared to record what was to come. Then the cranking would begin. Slow at first, just a tug, enough to remind the body of its seams. With each turn of the roller, the tension grew. Shoulders began to protest, knees strained. The human form, so carefully knit by nature, began to pull against itself. The sensation is not merely pain, it is disassembly. One's very structure betrays them. Joints stretch past reason, ligaments scream, and always the watchers wait, listening for the moment when pain overtakes pride, when a name or confession slips forth like a cry in the night. Not all confessions were true. That mattered little. The rack did not demand accuracy, only surrender. It is important to understand. Those who turned the handles were not always monsters. Some were officials of the court, trained and methodical. Others were men of the cloth, cloaked in solemn robes, convinced they served a higher purpose. They believed that pain could peel back deceit like bark from a branch, that through suffering, the soul might be cleansed and society preserved. One cannot help but wonder, how many truths were twisted into lies upon that frame? How many lies were accepted as truth because pain had demanded them? The rack, as it stretched the flesh, also distorted the law. And yet, there was ceremony to it, ritual, a deeply rooted belief that divine order required such measures. It was not used wantonly, at least not always. There were rules, edicts, permissions to be granted, but such formalities rarely offered true protection. Those who came before the rack did not return the same. Some did not return at all. In England it gained a grim nickname, the Duke of Exeter's daughter. An odd, almost mocking moniker that veiled its horror behind a curtain of noble wit. But it was no daughter. It bore no love, only a cold efficiency. Witnesses spoke of the sounds, bones grinding, sinew snapping, the wet gasp of pain. And yet, the room remained still, for every groan of the wheel was another inch closer to resolution. But perhaps the cruelest truth is this: the rack did not always need to be used. Sometimes its mere presence was enough. The sight of it, the creak of its frame as it was prepared, the knowledge of what it could do. Fear itself became a form of torture. Imagine being led into that chamber, knowing that the device awaited, knowing that your silence would be tested not with questions, but with the twist of a crank. How quickly might your resolve melt? How swiftly might your memory bend? You would not last long, dear friend. And that is no insult. It is simply truth. For the rack was not a test of virtue. It was a demolition of will. It unmade people piece by piece until what remained was pliable, whispering and broken. And yet, as the centuries turned and enlightenment crept into the corners of law, the rack was eventually set aside. Not destroyed, no. Some were kept in museums, others in castles turned tourist halls. But their time had passed. Still, their memory lingers. It lingers in the way we speak of torture, in the metaphors we use, in the quiet understanding that there was once a time when a machine of wood and rope held the power to rewrite lives. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, think not only of the pain it caused, but of the minds that built it. What kind of world must exist for such a device to be justified? And how fragile must truth be to require such violence to uncover it? Next time, we shall encounter a different kind of seat, the iron chair, a throne of metal and spikes, where confessions were not pulled by ropes, but pressed from skin by the cruel caress of steel. Until then, sleep well, and let the rack fade from your dreams like dust beneath the turning of time. Welcome back, dear friend. I'm glad you've returned. As the embers smoulder low and the night deepens around us, we step together into another room of shadows, one more chamber nestled within the cold memory of medieval justice. Our path is steady, unhurried. The flicker of a single candle guides us now, down winding steps of worn stone. With each descent, the air thickens, not just with age, but with the weight of what once was. Tonight, we take our place before the iron chair. It does not move, it does not speak, and yet this brutal relic of interrogation held court over countless souls who trembled beneath its gaze. Unlike the rack, which stretched and pulled, the iron chair was a throne of stillness, a place where the accused sat, not in authority, but in agony. Let us linger just for a moment on its appearance. At first glance, it might seem almost regal, a high-backed seat, upright and stern. But draw closer, and the details whisper louder. Iron studs, hundreds, perhaps thousands, cover its surface. Not merely ornamental, but sharp. Some are short, others long, and all are pointed like thorns. The seat, the back, the arms, even the footrest, all are armed with these cruel protrusions, and in some variations, the chair could be heated from beneath. Imagine that. A slow, smouldering fire kindled under the iron frame, warming it inch by inch until the metal itself became a silent, searing enemy. Not flames that burned openly, but heat that crept up, unseen, unstoppable, merciless. But before the flames, there was binding. The accused would be led in, perhaps a merchant accused of falsifying weights, or a midwife whispered to be in league with spirits. They would be placed upon the chair, their limbs bound tightly with leather straps or iron chains, ensuring that every inch of their body was pressed into the points. No space left untouched, no chance to shift and relieve the pressure. At first, The pain was still. A sting, then a burn, then a slow, aching torment as skin bruised, punctured, and bled. If heat was added, the experience turned from horror to hell. Flesh would blister, melt, adhere to the spikes. But the victim could not move. The bindings made sure of that. Every struggle, every flinch drove the thorns deeper, and through it all silence was demanded. For this was a seat not only of pain, but of confession. Inquisitors stood by, watching the eyes of the accused, listening for cracks in their composure. The questions came calmly, almost kindly. Who helped you? What did you say? Do you deny the charge? And all the while, the chair did its quiet work. It is said that those who confessed often did so not because they were guilty, but because their minds could not endure the illusion of choice. To stay silent was to bleed, to burn, to scream into an unlistening void. To speak, even falsely, was to be granted a pause, a mercy, even if only temporary. Now let us pause ourselves. Let us imagine, gently, how one might feel in such a chair. Not physically, for that thought is too cruel, but emotionally. How it must feel to sit before judges who believe they serve righteousness, while beneath you, your body begins to betray you. This was the greatest cruelty of all, that the iron chair was not used in fury, but in order, in routine. It was the tool of a system, not of a madman. Its use was sanctioned by courts, kings, bishops. Its authority came not from sadism, but from law. And that, dear friend, is why you would not last a day. For it is not only the pain that breaks a person, it is the realization that no help is coming, that the screams echo in stone and fall upon ears already turned away, that the justice you appeal to is the very hand that placed you here. Some chairs were more elaborate than others. Some had armrests designed to crush fingers. Some had sharpened, spikes hidden at the base, digging silently into the thighs. In France and Spain, versions were crafted with greater artistry, ornate carvings, sacred symbols, even quotations from scripture etched into the iron, as if to remind the accused, this suffering is not in vain, this pain is for your soul. And yet, no holy words can soften steel, no prayer can blunt a spike. Let us turn briefly to a story whispered in the walls of a forgotten monastery. A young monk, only 22, was accused of heresy after a parchment was found bearing curious script. He denied it, again and again, but the words were unfamiliar, and the elders feared contagion of the mind. And so he was placed upon the chair. Bound and bled, he held fast through an hour of pain. But as the iron warmed beneath him, and his body sagged into the thorns, his silence crumbled. He spoke names, his brothers, his teacher, all lies he later recanted, when the bishop arrived days later and ordered his release. But by then, he could not walk. His back was a lattice of wounds, his spirit, a crumbling wall. The iron chair had taken what it wanted, not truth, but submission. You might think, perhaps, that such a device would be rare, but it was not. Versions of the iron chair existed throughout Europe, from Italy to Germany to the British Isles. Some were even displayed in courtrooms, as a silent warning to those who might think to defy the law. Eventually, the Enlightenment came. The world began to ask questions it had once feared, and the chair fell out of favor. But it was never truly forgotten, for even now, replicas sit in museums, quietly daring you to look closer, and in them, the old whispers remain. Tonight, as the hour grows late, let your thoughts drift not toward the pain of the iron chair, but toward the strange faith that allowed it, toward a time when confession was measured not by truth, but by endurance. Next time, we'll step into yet another chamber, one where the mind itself was the target. We will meet the scavenger's daughter, a device designed not to stretch the body, but to compress it. Until then, sleep softly and let the iron rest beneath the dust of centuries. Welcome back, dear friend. Thank you for returning once more. The night has grown deeper. The world outside your window has gone still. And here, by the dimming fire, our journey continues. Not upward into dream, but gently downward into the memory of iron and law, where shadows take the shape of strange instruments once thought to serve truth. Tonight, we encounter a device less well known than the rack or the iron chair, but no less haunting. If anything, it is more insidious. For where the rack sought to stretch, this device sought to compress. Where the chair pierced with outward pain, this tool folded the body inward, making a cage of the self. It was known by a curious name, the Scavenger's Daughter. The title alone conjures questions, doesn't it? Was it a real person? A metaphor? In truth, it was neither. The name is a corruption of its inventor's title, Sir Leonard Skevington, Lieutenant of the Tower of London during the reign of Henry VIII. Skevington's Daughter, it was first called, before time and rumour turned it into something darker, more poetic, more terrible. Let us walk slowly into its story. Unlike the rack, which sprawled wide, the Scavenger's Daughter was compact. Economical. It consisted of a metal frame, hinged and angular, designed to bend the human body into a position most unnatural. The victim was forced to crouch low, knees to chest, chin to knees, arms wrapped around the legs like a forced embrace. And then, the frame was tightened not with violence but with certainty. The body was squeezed, pressed inward, not stretched until it broke, but folded until it fractured. Blood vessels burst beneath the skin. Ears bled. Eyes swelled. The breath became short, shallow, trapped in a ribcage rapidly turning into its own prison. It was a terrible poetry of pain, the inverse of the rack. And the symbolism was clear. Where the rack sought expansion, this sought collapse. Where one unraveled the body, the other compacted it into its own torment. Imagine for a moment being forced into such a position. Imagine your spine bent forward until it groans, your limbs bound to hold you tight against yourself, every muscle screaming, not to move, but simply to unfold. The pressure isn't sharp, it's total, like being swallowed by your own flesh. But worse than the pain, perhaps, is the message. There is nowhere to go. You are not chained to a wall, nor stretched across a board. You are trapped within your own form, bent inward, as if to punish you for daring to stand. This device was most often used in the Tower of London, on political prisoners, spies, dissenters, those whose minds were dangerous. The folding of the body was meant, too, to be the folding of the will. In some accounts, blood was said to pour from the nose and ears within minutes. The compression cut off circulation, led to ruptures. But death was not always the aim. No, like the rack, the Scavenger's Daughter had a question to ask. Or rather, it demanded an answer. And in the deafening silence of that compression, many gave answers, whether true or not, just to escape the vice of their own shape. It was, in essence, the dark twin of the rack. The two were often used in tandem, one after the other. A horrifying symmetry. Stretch the body until it breaks, then compress it until it collapses. The accused became a thing of knots and fractures, truth and lies smeared together in sweat and blood. There is a strange sort of genius to such cruelty, isn't there? A perverse logic. If you cannot find the truth by pulling a man apart, perhaps you can fold him in on himself until his secrets spill out. But there is more here than metal and method. Let us pause, as always, and reflect. What kind of world believes that truth lives only in the breaking of bones? What kind of justice depends on the architecture of suffering? It is a world not so far from ours at times, for the Scavenger's Daughter is not only a device, it is an idea. That one can be crushed into compliance. That pressure reveals purity. That silence is truth. In the Tower of London, the stone still remembers. Guides speak softly of the instruments that once lay hidden beneath the floors. Tourists gaze at replicas, shudder, and move on. But history lingers, like the scent of old iron in damp air. A single document remains from a nobleman imprisoned under suspicion of treason in 1540. He wrote, in shaky Latin, that after his time in the device, he no longer knew if his thoughts were his own. Not because of pain alone, but because the very shape of his body had been rewritten. He was folded, mind and frame alike. That, dear friend, is why you would not last a day. Not just because the joints would give way, but because something deeper would yield. The part of you that knows the difference between your silence and your consent. And so tonight, let us fold our thoughts not inward like the scavenger's daughter, but outward, toward peace. Let us breathe deeply and allow our limbs to rest freely. You are not bound. You are not bent. You are safe, far from the shadowed stones of the tower. Next time, we shall journey into an altogether different kind of torment, one that pierces without a blade. We will explore the heretic's fork, a cruelly simple tool that made even speech a punishment. But for now, let go. Let the tension slip away and sleep unbound. Hello again, dear friend. The candle burns lower now. Its flame is steady but dim, casting golden light upon worn pages and idle thoughts. Thank you for returning once more to this quiet hour, where together we walk along the colder paths of memory, not to frighten, but to understand. Tonight, we enter a realm not of crushing frames or burning seats, but of something subtler. A device so deceptively simple that its cruelty lies not in its appearance, but in its quiet, inescapable presence. Tonight, we meet the heretic's fork. The name alone carries weight, doesn't it? The word heretic was once enough to set fires blazing, to summon inquisitors from far corners of kingdoms. It meant more than disagreement. It meant danger, rebellion, the soul veering from divine order. But rather than being burned at the stake outright, as many were, some were instead offered another path, a path to confession. And along that path stood this unassuming tool, this fork of torment. Let us look closely. The heretic's fork was not large, no taller than your forearm. It consisted of a slim metal rod with two short pronged ends, each tipped with sharpened steel. One end was placed beneath the chin, the other above the sternum, or sometimes beneath the chin and against the throat. Then the device was fastened in place, often by means of a leather collar or iron band around the neck. Once secured, it allowed no movement, no nodding, no swallowing, and above all, no speaking. For to move even slightly was to drive those twin points into soft flesh, into muscle, into vein, into voice. It was not designed to kill, at least not immediately. Its power came from what it forbade. The victim could not sleep, they could not beg, they could not scream, they could only exist, rigid, upright, silent. And that silence, dear friend, was not peace. It was a prison. Imagine waking in the middle of the night, muscles trembling from fatigue, unable to let your head fall forward. For if you did, the spikes would punish your weariness. Or picture being questioned, and knowing that one word, one syllable, would drive pain through your jaw and chest. The heretic's fork turned the body against itself. It made speech, a natural release of emotion, into a self-inflicted wound. It was used most famously during the Inquisition. Accused heretics were not always thrown into fire immediately. Many were given the opportunity to confess, and if they did not, measures were taken. This device was placed not as punishment alone, but as a tool of encouragement, a whisper of pain rather than a shout. But that whisper was relentless. Some wore it for hours, others for days. The longer it remained, the more the body suffered, not from sharpness, but from exhaustion. The neck stiffened, The spine throbbed. Saliva became difficult to swallow. And yet, no scream could escape. The fork allowed only silence. It is here that the true cruelty lives. Not in blood, not in fire, but in denial. The denial of the most human acts: speech, movement, rest. To survive, it was not just to endure pain. It was to wage war against your own reflexes. And now, gently, let us place ourselves there. You are seated in a chamber, not grand, not dramatic. Perhaps just a stone cell with a single torch and the sound of water dripping from an unseen corner. The Inquisitor speaks softly, reading from a script, eyes never leaving yours. You do not answer. You cannot. The fork presses, upward, downward. Your body obeys. Your mind screams. Perhaps you try to signal your innocence, a blink, a tear. But every attempt to explain yourself meets only steel. And so, slowly, you retreat inward. Your thoughts grow quieter, not from calm, but from desperation. And that, dear friend, is how this device worked. It didn't extract information. It extracted isolation. It took away the only comforts the condemned had left: the ability to cry out, to rest, to express. Why? Would you not last a day because your humanity would ache louder than your wounds? You are not made to be silent. None of us are. We speak, even in pain. We cry out, even in darkness. We ask for help. We whisper prayers. The heretic's fork severed all of that. Not by cutting the tongue, but by holding it hostage. And yet, in its simplicity, lies its terrible brilliance. It required no fire, no guards, no blood-stained table, just a piece of metal and time. There are records, thin, faded records, of monks who wore it in self-punishment, believing they had spoken out of turn or blasphemed. There are darker tales of prisoners who wore it until infection crept in through the punctures and the body gave way. But most wore it just long enough to break. In museums, you may still find it. Small, harmless looking. Visitors walk by it quickly, often missing its purpose. But those who know, those who pause and read the quiet plaque, understand. This was not a tool of noise, it was a tool of absence. And so tonight, as we extinguish our own voice for the evening, let us remember how precious it is to speak, to express fear, to whisper dreams, to say, I am still here. Next time, we shall move from silence to shame. We'll explore the cruel spectacle of the pillory, where pain came not just from bindings, but from the eyes of the crowd. Until then, let your breath come easy. Let your head rest, safely unpierced, and sleep deeply. Hello again, dear friend. The fire crackles softly tonight, its warmth steady against the hush of nightfall. Outside, the wind stirs gently among the trees, brushing leaves like parchment turning in an old, forgotten library. As you settle once more into stillness, allow me to guide you back to a different kind of chamber, one without iron spikes or hidden cells, a chamber that was not enclosed by stone, but open to the sky, to the wind, and to the watching eyes of everyone you ever knew. Tonight, we stand before the pillory. At first glance, it may seem merciful, a wooden frame, 2 boards hinged at the top, with holes cut for the neck and hands. It lacks the sharpness of blades, the fire of brands, or the pressure of torturous steel. But, my friend, the pain of the pillory was never meant to come from within. It came from without, from the gaze, the judgment, and the cruelty of the crowd. The pillory was a public instrument of punishment. Its purpose was not merely to restrain, but to expose. It did not demand confession through pain. It demanded endurance through shame. Let us picture it together. A village square. Cobblestone, paths dappled in the early morning sun. Merchants calling out their wares. Children playing with sticks and hoops. And in the center, raised on a small platform so all could see, stands the pillory. You are brought forward. Perhaps you have spoken out of turn, or stolen a loaf of bread, or been accused of harboring unclean thoughts. You are not bound in chains, but you are marched like a criminal. The townsfolk gather, some out of duty, others out of delight. You are placed in the device. The top board is lifted, and your neck and wrists are guided, no, forced, into the prepared holes. Then, with a heavy thunk, the board closes down, locking you in place. You cannot lift your head. Your arms are fixed forward, elbows bent. You are on display, and the performance begins. There is laughter at first, jeering, shouts of insult. Then, as the day wears on, the audience becomes more involved. A rotting apple strikes your shoulder. A tomato smears across your brow. A child throws a pebble. Someone spits. Your clothes dampen. Your dignity begins to wear thin. But it's not just the food or the objects hurled. It's the stories, the murmurs, the falsehoods that travel faster than truth. Did you hear what he really did? I heard she consorted with devils. They say he spoke Latin to a cat. Whether guilty or not, your reputation is shredded beneath the weight of eyes. And that, dear friend, is the torture. Because you cannot explain yourself. Your mouth may move, but your voice is drowned out by the crowd. And as the sun climbs higher, your legs ache, your arms numb, your back cramps. You wish for stillness, for solitude, but the pillory offers no mercy, no shadows, no walls. Some punishments lasted a few hours, others days, in the rain, in the heat, in the raw cold of winter. But the worst of it was always the moment you were seen, not by strangers alone, but by neighbors, friends, family, people who once knew your name, who now only know the accusation. And when it was over, if it ended, you were not taken away in secret. You were released, slowly, publicly. The boards were lifted, your limbs withdrawn, your body sagging with exhaustion, but the damage was already done. You walked home, not as a person, but as a cautionary tale. In some towns, the pillory stood beside the church. In others, near the tavern, always somewhere central. It was not hidden. It was a tool of spectacle, of fear and ridicule. It taught the public not what crime was, but what consequence looked like. But there is something more here, something deeper. The pillory was not always for the guilty. Sometimes it was used politically, to humiliate dissenters, or religiously, to shame those whose beliefs were deemed dangerous. A woman who read aloud, a man who refused to kneel. The pillory did not ask whether you were wrong. It simply declared it, and therein lies its cruelty. Unlike the rack, the pillory left few marks on the flesh, but on the spirit. It carved deep. Many who stood there never returned to ordinary life. They became whispers, shadows in doorways, ghosts in daylight. Now pause with me, dear friend. Imagine yourself within it, not for a violent crime, but for a simple word spoken out of place, a question asked too boldly, a gesture misunderstood. Would you last an hour? 2. Would you hold your composure as old friends passed by and said nothing? Would you meet the gaze of your mother as she looked away? That is why you wouldn't last a day. Because it wasn't just a matter of pain. It was a matter of identity. The pillory did not merely punish, it rewrote who you were in the eyes of your world. And yet, for centuries, it stood as a symbol of order, a pillar of law, a warning written not in ink, but in posture and tears. Eventually, like many tools of spectacle, the pillory fell out of favor. The crowds grew uneasy. The lines between justice and cruelty blurred, and slowly the wood rotted, the stocks loosened, and the stage was abandoned, but its echo remains. In the way we shame, in the way we isolate, in the way we remember mistakes, louder than we remember intentions. So tonight, as the fire fades and your room becomes a quiet haven once more, Let the noise of that ancient square fade too. Let the gaze of judgment lift. Let yourself be unseen, unbound. Next time, we'll return indoors, to a device that touches not only the limbs, but the bones themselves. We'll descend into the world of the breaking wheel, where justice met its end in a circle of spokes. Until then, sleep softly and walk in your dreams, unshackled. Welcome again, dear friend. The air feels heavier tonight, doesn't it? The fire glows low, its warmth tempered by a sense of reverence, even hesitation. For as we continue our descent into the hidden dungeons and forgotten rituals of medieval justice, we must pause here at the edge of something more brutal, more final. Tonight, we speak of the breaking wheel. Unlike the quieter punishments we have known, the confined silence of the heretic's fork, or the public shame of the pillory, this was not a device of endurance or isolation. The breaking wheel was a sentence, a spectacle, a statement to the masses that law, when crossed, could bend bone and spirit into dust. Let us begin not in the chamber, but in the town square. It is early morning. A crowd gathers slowly. Children sit atop their fathers' shoulders. Market stalls pause their opening, and conversations hush with anticipation. There, at the center, stands the wheel, large, wooden, simple, raised on a post. To one side, a cart, and in that cart, a person, bound, the condemned. This punishment went by many names: the wheel, the Catherine wheel, the breaking wheel, but its message was always the same. Here ends the road for those judged beyond mercy. The wheel itself was often a cartwheel, sometimes reinforced, sometimes spiked, but always symbolic. Its circular form was believed to mirror divine justice, eternal, unbreaking, ever turning. And yet it was used to shatter the most mortal thing of all, the human body. Let us move gently through what followed. The condemned was tied down, either to the wheel itself, or to a wooden platform beneath it. Their arms and legs were stretched, sometimes tied with rope, sometimes left loose, depending on the sentence. The executioner stood beside them, holding an iron bar or a heavy club. And then, with ritual precision, the breaking began. A blow to the leg, a pause, a shout from the crowd, a second blow, higher now to the thigh, then the arm, then the shoulder. Each strike was meant to break bone without severing flesh, to fold the limbs in unnatural ways. A body turned into angles. Some sentences required only the limbs be broken. Others called for the spine. Others still, most grim, demanded the blows continue until the entire body lay in a grotesque spiral. And if the wheel was used as a frame, the broken body might be woven into its spokes, arms and legs twisted through the gaps, displayed, left, for days in the sun and rain. Not as warning alone, but as doctrine. This is what happens. But why, you ask, such cruelty? Because the wheel was not merely punishment. It was theatre. It was theology. It was, in the eyes of those who wielded it, righteous. The condemned were often accused of grave offences: murder, treason, sacrilege, crimes that tore the fabric of society, it was believed. And so their punishment must be equally tearing, visibly, publicly, their body becoming a metaphor, broken for the world to see. It is said that some were granted a mercy, a final blow to the chest or throat before the breaking began, to spare them the full agony. Others received no such grace. There are tales, though few, of survivors. One man in 14th century Germany lived for 2 full days after his breaking, left on the wheel, semi-conscious, bones shattered, birds circling above. When he finally died, villagers claimed he'd been cleansed through suffering, as if the pain itself made him worthy of forgiveness. But let us not linger on spectacle alone. Let us, as always, turn inward. What would it mean truly to face such a sentence? Not just The pain, though that alone is unimaginable, but the moment before, the knowledge, the understanding that you are no longer a person in the eyes of your peers, but a canvas, that your body is about to be painted with fractures and offered as an example. That is the breaking you would not survive, because it begins before the wheel ever touches you. It begins in the eyes of the crowd, in the prayers of the priest who stands beside you, praying not for your deliverance, but your release from flesh. In many accounts, the wheel was also used as an altar. Priests would bless it. Judges would stand in solemn robes. Town criers would read aloud your name, your crimes, your fate. And still, you were alive. Some wept. Others screamed. A few remained quiet, stunned by the slow realization that their body was no longer theirs. And even if the pain could be endured, even if each blow was met with silence, what came after was worse. The body left exposed, picked by birds, studied by children, remembered not for who you were, but how you ended. The wheel was final, and yet, for centuries, it stood tall, an unquestioned part of European justice, in France, in the Holy Roman Empire, in Scandinavia, sometimes used alone, sometimes alongside hanging or drowning or fire. Eventually, it faded. Its grotesque pageantry no longer sat well with the changing hearts of kings and bishops, but the echoes remain in the phrases we use, broken on the wheel, in the quiet fear of public death, in the realization that law, once twisted, can become a weapon without mercy. And so, dear friend, as the wheel turns no more, let your breath come easy. You are not bound. Your limbs are whole. Your name is not being read aloud in the square. Next, time. We'll leave the wheel behind and enter a quieter torment once more. A mask of fear. A device both symbolic and suffocating. The iron mask. But tonight, as the fire flickers one last time, sleep without the weight of judgment. Let your body rest gently, and dream not of circles but of freedom. Welcome again, dear friend. The room is still now. The fire hums faintly in its cradle, casting a pale glow upon the dark corners of the past we continue to visit together. Thank you for walking this road beside me, one paved not with stone, but with stories the world would often rather forget, and yet it is in remembering them that we find meaning. Tonight, our journey turns once more from overt brutality to quiet suppression. We leave the wheel behind, the spectacle and the screams, and return to something subtler, more symbolic. Less about breaking the bones, and more about erasing the self. Tonight, we meet the iron mask. It may sound familiar. The phrase carries a mythic weight, conjuring images of dungeons and hidden identities. Some think of the prisoner in the Bastille, the man in the iron mask, made famous by novels and whispers. But beyond fiction lies a reality just as chilling. For the iron mask was real. And it was used not just to conceal, but to humiliate, isolate, and slowly dismantle the soul. Let us start not with the object itself, but with the intent. The mask was not meant to kill. It was not designed to draw blood or break limbs. Its power came from its permanence, from its presence. It was forged from metal, iron or sometimes bronze, and crafted to cover the face completely. Some were plain, with small slits for breathing and seeing. Others were grotesque, molded into the faces of beasts, fools, or devils, a punishment not only of isolation, but of mockery. Once fitted, the mask was clamped shut, sometimes locked, sometimes bolted. The air within turned warm, stale, claustrophobic. Eating became difficult, speech muffled and distorted, the weight ever present, the shame inescapable. And so we must ask, why? Why was such a device used? Because the face, dear friend, is identity. It is expression. It is the first thing others see and the last thing we see of ourselves in still water or polished glass. To wear a mask of iron was not simply to be punished. It was to be removed, to become something else. The iron mask was used across Europe in various forms. In Italy and France, it often served political ends, used against those whose names were dangerous to say aloud. In England and Germany, it appeared in the punishment of scolds, women accused of gossip, defiance, or disobedience. Some were forced to wear masks with long metal tongues or sharp bits inside, cutting whenever they attempted to speak. These were known as scolds' bridles or branks, but they shared the same soul as the iron mask. A tool of silence, of transformation, and imagine, if you will, the daily torment. The mask grows heavier as the hours pass. The skin beneath sweats, chafes, bruises. The voice becomes strange, as though it belongs to someone else. People stare, not at you, but at the thing you have become. And if the mask is sculpted into a fool's grin or a demonic leer, the humiliation deepens. Laughter follows you like a second shadow. Children point, adults avert their gaze. Your face is no longer your own. Let us pause here, as always, to step inside the moment. You are led through a village square, hands bound, the mask already in place. You hear your own breath echoing inside the metal. Every step is a reminder of your loss, not of freedom, perhaps. You may still walk, but of recognition. No one calls you by name. They call you by the shape of your mask. Beast, scold, monster, fool. You try to speak, but the sound is wrong, echoed, broken, inhuman. You try to look someone in the eye, but they flinch. You do not weep, because the tears have no place to fall. They collect beneath the rim, stinging, waiting. That, dear friend, is why you would not last a day, because the iron mask did not destroy the body. It destroyed the connection between you and the world, between your voice and your meaning, between your face and your name. And what's most tragic is that you were meant to survive it. This was no execution. It was a transformation, a message. You returned to life still breathing, but never the same. Even after the mask was removed, its memory clung to your skin. The weight remained in your spine, in the way people looked at you, or did not. In some cases, prisoners wore the mask for months, others only days, but the damage was done quickly and deeply. We know of a case in 17th century France, a man accused of treason, though no formal charge was ever published. He was kept masked in the Bastille, his face never seen by guards or scribes. He was known only by number. When he died, the mask was removed, but no one recognized him, not even his jailer. He had been erased. So yes, the iron mask was real, and its cruelty lies not in the physical pain it caused, but in the way it made a person disappear while still alive. Tonight, as you close your eyes, remember this. You have your voice, you have your name, you have your face, and those are precious things, too easily lost in a world where law once wore iron. Next time, we will visit a device far more blunt, a tool whose cruelty was written in bruises and breaks. The boot. It was called, and it made every step that followed a reminder of agony. But for now, rest. Your breath is your own, your face uncovered, and sleep is yours to claim. Welcome back, dear friend. Tonight, the fire is lower than usual. It glows like a coal buried deep in memory, steady but weary. The wind outside has grown still, as if the world itself is pausing, listening. Perhaps it knows where we are going. Next, this evening, we leave behind the silent erasure of the iron mask and descend into something more primal, something less about humiliation and more about pain, direct, blunt, unyielding. Tonight, we meet the boot. Unlike some of the other devices we've explored, the boot was not ornate. It was not carved with symbols or cloaked in religious ceremony. It was simple, like a hammer, is simple. Its purpose was clear: to destroy the feet and legs of the accused until their body spoke what their mouth had refused. Let us begin, as always, by seeing it. The boot came in many forms across the centuries. In Scotland, it was often made of metal. In France, of wood. But its principle was the same. A narrow case or casing was placed around the leg, from the foot to the knee. Once secured, wedges, sometimes made of wood, sometimes iron, were driven between the casing and the flesh. Each wedge was hammered in with slow, deliberate strikes. The pressure increased with every blow. Flesh compressed, muscles tore, bones cracked, and it did not stop at a single wedge. The torturer would add another, and another, each new wedge forcing the leg tighter against its prison. Eventually, the tibia would snap, then the fibula, then the kneecap, if they pressed far enough. It was not quick, and it was not clean. The pain was described in one record as like being split with fire inside the bone. There was no part of the mind that could distract from it, no part of the soul that could hide. But what makes the boot especially haunting is that it didn't kill. It left you alive, broken, yes, crippled, often permanently, but alive, because the boot, like the rack or the fork, was not about death, it was about revelation. You were placed in it not to be punished, but to be persuaded. The question was always the same: will you speak now? And for many, the answer was yes. Let us step into that moment, if we dare. You are seated in a cold room. The walls are bare, the torchlight flickering with indifference. Your leg is slid into the boot, and you hear the soft clink of the first wedge being prepared. The torturer does not shout, he does not leer, he simply waits for the order. The hammer is raised. The first wedge slips in. There's pressure, immediate, deep. You grit your teeth. You've been told the first is only a warning. Then the second wedge comes. This one takes your breath away. You feel the edge of your bone press against itself, as if trying to escape your own skin. You cry out, not a scream, but a plea. The interrogator asks you to speak. You shake your head. The third wedge follows. Now it is no longer pain. It is fire. Inside, a sensation like splitting glass. Your back arches. The iron band cuts into your ankle. You begin to babble, half-truths, prayers, confessions. And still, there are more wedges. The boot was used across Europe, especially in the late medieval and early modern periods. Records show it being deployed against suspected witches, traitors, and spies, but not always for grand crimes. In some places, a merchant who refused to give up his partners under tax investigation might find his way into it, or a farmer suspected of hoarding grain. The boot was not a tool of kings alone. It was used by towns, by sheriffs, by church authorities. Its effectiveness was not in its ingenuity, but in its brutality. There is something primal about foot pain. The feet carry us, hold our weight. When they are hurt, the entire body suffers. And when they are broken, the body can do little more than beg for mercy. That's why, dear friend, you would not last a day. Not because your spirit is weak, but because your foundation would crumble, literally. You would feel every hammer stroke in your spine, in your teeth, in the pit of your soul. And afterward, you might be released. You might be dragged away, but you would not walk again. Some limped for life, others never stood. There is a tale from Flanders in the late 1400s. A midwife accused of performing abortions was subjected to the boot. She confessed. Names, dates, details. Later, it was found her confession was false, spoken in the throes of agony, hoping for relief. But when released, she could not return home. Her feet had blackened. Gangrene set in. She died a week later, not in the boot, but because of it. This too was justice, they said. Let us pause, not just to mourn, but to understand. Devices like the boot remind us that cruelty does not always look like spectacle. Sometimes it is, measured in inches, in wedges, in the slow, patient act of applying pressure until something gives way. We live in a world now where few know this pain, but the echoes remain, in language, in law, in the knowledge that once, not long ago, truth was asked not with questions, but with steel and splinters. Tonight, as you stretch your own legs beneath a soft blanket, as you let your toes curl and your breath steady, be grateful for movement, for stillness without pain, for the knowledge that your words are yours, unforced, unbroken. Next time, we'll look at a punishment that turns humiliation into artwork, a chilling blend of ridicule and cruelty. The shame masks. But for now, rest. Let your steps and dreams be light, and your path free of iron. Good evening, dear friend. Tonight, the candle burns brighter than usual, as if offering a small defiance to the darkness that has followed us through these past chambers. And yet, even in its gentle light, there are shadows that linger, not always violent, but no less cruel. Tonight, we step into a different sort of punishment, one that does not scream with blood or bone, but whispers through laughter and ridicule. A punishment that walked the line between theatre and torture, where iron and imagination met to make pain visible. Tonight, we wear the shame masks. You may have seen their likenesses in old woodcuts or behind museum glass. Strange, exaggerated faces forged in iron, grinning devils, long-tongued women, wide-eyed beasts. Some had donkey ears, others were shaped like pigs or clowns. Many bore expressions too wild for comedy, too grotesque for honesty. But these were not costumes. They were punishments, crafted to be worn, endured, displayed. Let us begin with purpose. The shame mask was not made to hurt the flesh, not in the way the boot or the rack did. Instead, it wounded something far more tender, the identity. It turned the wearer into an object, a joke, a cautionary tale for all to see. The crimes? They were often minor: gossip, lying, insulting a neighbor, arguing too loudly in church, sometimes drunkenness, sometimes mere defiance. These were the so-called crimes of the mouth, and the punishment was to make the mouth ridiculous. Each mask was tailored to the offense. A gossiper might be forced to wear a mask with an oversized tongue protruding grotesquely from the lips. A liar might be fitted with one that included a long nose, much like the tales of Pinocchio centuries later. A drunkard's mask might include a small keg or horns, and a nagging wife might be made to resemble a donkey or a shrew. Once worn, the offender was paraded through the streets or chained in a public place. The mask, often heavy, pressed down upon the head and shoulders, sometimes causing bruising or cuts. The interior was rarely smooth. Some masks included spikes inside, to prevent the wearer from moving their jaw or speaking at all. Others had bells attached, ringing mockery with every step. But it wasn't the iron that hurt most. It was the laughter. Imagine, if you will, being led through your own town. Not beaten, not bleeding, but mocked. Children run ahead of you, mimicking your strange new face. Old women whisper behind their hands. A neighbor you once helped cross the stream spits at your feet. Your husband or wife cannot bear to meet your eyes, except they can't see your eyes. They see only the mask. That is the true punishment. For the mask does not just conceal, it redefines. It tells the world what you are now. Not what you did, but what you have become, and even after it is removed, the image remains. The shame masks were especially common in Germanic regions and throughout parts of Eastern and Central Europe. In some towns, a row of masks hung on the wall of the courthouse or city square, each labelled by offence. The message was clear: step out of line, and you too will wear the face of disgrace. In some records, people were forced to wear the mask for hours. Others days, and some were repeated offenders, made to don the iron again and again until their real face was forgotten beneath its shadow. Now, gently, let us step inside that moment. You are pulled from your home, not by soldiers, but by town constables. The offence, a heated word, a muttered insult, a truth the wrong person overheard. The mask is chosen. It smells of old sweat and rust. It is heavier than you expected. You are not told how long it will stay on. You are not allowed to remove it. It fits badly, presses your cheeks, cuts slightly beneath the chin. And then you are walked, not marched like a criminal, not dragged like a traitor, but escorted like a lesson. Through streets you once called your own, past stalls where you bought bread, past faces that once smiled in greeting. Now they grin for another reason. You try not to cry, but the tears have nowhere to go. They gather inside, caught behind iron eyes. You are seen by everyone, and yet no one sees you. That, dear friend, is why you would not last a day. Because there is a kind of pain worse than injury, a pain that grows not in the body, but in the gaze of others. To be laughed at is one thing, but to be reduced to a symbol, a walking joke, a living warning, that is another entirely, and the shame mask achieved that perfectly. Eventually, the use of these masks declined, not out of mercy, but because society found new ways to shame. Stocks, pillories, and other more theatrical punishments took their place. But the masks remain, silent, cold, waiting. You can still see them today, mounted on walls in museums. They no longer cover flesh, but they still speak. They tell us of a world that believed punishment need not draw blood to leave scars. And in some ways, they tell us of our own world too. For do we not still wear masks, not of iron, but of judgment, of rumors, of stories told without truth? Tonight, let us take off our own unseen masks. Let the warmth of fire touch your real face. Let your name remain your own, untwisted by mockery or law. Next time, we'll enter the chambers of heat, not the forge, but the flame. We'll explore the brazen bull, a horror of sound and smoke, where screams became music to the cruel. But for now, sleep gently. No mask upon your face, no bells to ring, no laughter but the kind that soothes. Welcome once more, dear friend. Tonight the fire seems hesitant, as if it too fears the tale we are about to unfold. Its flame wavers, casting nervous shadows along the walls. Even the wind is quieter, as though it holds its breath. And perhaps that is wise, for where we are going, breath itself becomes a curse. Tonight, we enter the fire, not metaphorically, not symbolically, but literally. We approach the cruelest blend of art and death, the marriage of invention and agony, cast in bronze and built to sing. Tonight, we meet the Brazen Bull. It is a name that echoes through legend and fear, a device so infamous that even in modern minds, its image remains vivid. A life-sized hollow bull made entirely of bronze into which a living person was placed and cooked alive. But this was no ordinary fire and no ordinary execution. Let us begin at its origin. The story begins in ancient Greece, though its echoes reverberated through medieval lore. The tyrant Phalaris of Acragas, in Sicily, was said to have commissioned the device. The inventor, a man named Perillos, presented it as a masterpiece of both punishment and spectacle. The bull was hollow, with a door built into its side. Inside, there was space for a person, barely. The walls were thick bronze, the belly curved, but the genius, or madness, of the invention was in the head. Within the bull's mouth, tubes and acoustic systems were carved so that when someone screamed from inside, the sound would be transformed, not heard as pleas or panic, but as music, as the bellowing of a beast. Yes, dear friend, the brazen bull did not merely consume you in fire, it sang, When fire was lit beneath it, the metal would gradually heat. The body within would feel the slow rise in temperature, not a burst, but a creeping tide. Skin would flush, blister, blacken. The lungs would burn with heat. But long before death came, the victim would scream, and it was those screams that became the chorus of the bull. The tubes shaped the cries into grotesque harmony, deep, resonant, echoing. Those outside would hear the bull groan and roar as if the statue itself were alive, angry, possessed. Imagine that. A city square, the sun glinting off polished bronze, a priest blessing the pyre, nobles seated with hands folded. And then, as the flames rise, the bull groans, low and long, as if mourning, as if laughing. Inside, someone is dying by degrees, and their death is entertainment. The cruelty lies not just in the fire, but in the audience. It is said that Pyre, the very inventor, was the first to be placed inside. Phalaris wished to test the sound, and when he heard the screams echo from the bull's mouth, transformed into music, he applauded. History disagrees on whether Pyre was killed then or spared for a later death. But the bull remained. In the medieval imagination, the brazen bull became legend. Whether used in truth or preserved in metaphor, its image was invoked in tales of tyrants and martyrs. Some say it appeared again in Rome, others in later periods of Christian persecution. But whether literal or symbolic, the meaning was always clear. This was pain made beautiful, torture made into theatre, death dressed in bronze. Let us, gently, step closer. Imagine the heat. You are pushed forward, not with violence, but with ritual. Your hands are bound. The door is opened, it creaks. The metal inside is already warm. You are told to crawl. The floor is curved, slippery. You fit, barely. The door closes behind you. The latch falls. It is dark. The air grows thick. Then comes the first kiss of heat. At your feet, then your back, then everywhere. You try to shift, to move, but the space allows little. Your body presses against the bronze. It scorches. You scream. But what they hear outside is a song. The brazen bull does not echo your agony. It mocks it. It reshapes it. And worst of all, your death is slow. It can take an hour, sometimes more. The metal doesn't cook you all at once. It roasts you, inch by inch, until the lungs collapse, until the breath fails, until there are no more sounds to shape. Only then does the bull go silent, and when it is opened, what remains is unrecognizable. That is why you would not last a day, dear friend, because the brazen bull did not ask for confession. It asked for performance. It did not seek truth. It created a spectacle. It robbed you of death's dignity, of the silence usually granted to suffering. Your pain became an opera. Your end, applause. No part of it was just. No part of it was redemption. Only bronze. In museums today, replicas exist, none functional. But the idea persists. In horror films, in paintings, in dark stories whispered to those who crave the edge of terror, we are drawn to it and repelled. That is the paradox of cruelty, wrapped in art. So tonight, as you lie in your bed, beneath a sky free of fire, let your breath be yours. Let your silence be sacred. Let no flame touch you except the one that warms gently at your side. Next time, we'll descend once more into the mind's torment, a device that made no blood spill but left screams behind the eyes, the water torture. But for now, rest. Let the bronze cool. Let the song cease. Let your night be without. Audience, welcome once again, dear friend. The air tonight feels gentle, soft as woven linen. Outside, the world is quiet. The moon sails high above rooftops and steeples, casting silver over sleeping towns. And yet, Within the stillness, our path winds on, through corridors the world has tried to seal away, but which memory has left unlocked. Tonight, we speak of a punishment that leaves few scars, draws no blade, spills no blood. Tonight, we meet water torture. Now, the phrase itself has been used in many times and places for many cruel practices involving drowning, immersion, or deprivation. But tonight, we will focus on one particular form, an ancient technique refined over centuries. So simple, and yet so devastating. It is known most famously as the Chinese water torture, though it was practiced far beyond China, and with origins lost in the fog of myth and empire. Let us begin, as always, with what we see. A chamber, dark but not silent. In its center lies a bench or table. Above it, suspended from the ceiling, a simple bowl or funnel. From its narrow tip, a single drop of water falls, not in a stream, not in a gush, one drop, and then another, and another. The prisoner is bound, lying flat, arms tied, legs restrained, their face tilted upward, fixed beneath the falling water. The forehead, the most exposed and sensitive part of the skull, is the target. The first drop is merely cold, the second is curious. By the 100th, the body begins to flinch. By the 1000th, the mind begins to crack. You see, the genius and the horror of this method lies in its patience. Water, on its own, is harmless, gentle, a symbol of life and renewal. But here it becomes an instrument of psychological warfare. Because what hurts most is not the water. It is the waiting, the knowing that the next drop is coming, knowing that you cannot move, knowing that your tormentor is not shouting, not cursing, not even watching. The process continues on its own, slow, rhythmic, relentless. And what does that do to a mind? Let us step, gently, into that space. You are bound tightly, too tightly, to adjust your posture. Your arms are starting to tingle. The torchlight above flickers, but you cannot look away from the ceiling. And then it starts. Drip. It lands on your forehead. Cold. Uninvited. Drip. You tense. But the bindings hold you in place. Drip. You try to distract yourself. You recall prayers, faces of loved ones. You recite songs in your mind, but the rhythm breaks through. Drip. Soon you begin to dread it. Not the drop itself, but the time between. That quiet span when you know it's coming, but not exactly when. Your body braces. Your breath catches. Drip. Hours pass. There is no escape from it. You are not allowed to sleep. If your eyes begin to close, a sharp voice awakens you. If you drift into dreams, the water brings you back. Your forehead begins to sting, then ache. A bruise forms, but worse is the pattern. For your mind begins to hear things in the rhythm, whispers, footsteps, voices. Some speak words you know, others you fear you invented. And all the while, drip. There are stories, real ones, of prisoners who lost all sense of self under this torment. One man, held in a monastery's subterranean cell, began to believe he was turning into stone. Another, a woman accused of conspiracy, began to laugh uncontrollably after 6 hours, unable to speak coherent words thereafter. Water, dear friend, just water. That is the genius of cruelty. It does not always need fire. Sometimes it only needs patience, a slow method, a willing silence. That is why you would not last a day, because even the strongest body cannot armor the mind forever. Even the calmest soul eventually flinches. The drops find their rhythm, and that rhythm becomes all you hear. Some were subjected to this for interrogation, others as punishment for crimes not deemed worthy of the rack or whip. It was seen as clean, no blood, no disfigurement, but no less effective. In some cases, water was used not just on the forehead, but to simulate drowning, known as water cure or waterboarding in modern terms. It involved forced ingestion or inhalation, bringing the sensation of death without the act itself. But tonight, we remain with the drop, the single, endless drop. Let us step back. Now, return from that chamber. Your skin is dry, your forehead unbruised. The only dripping you hear is rain upon the roof, or perhaps the rhythm of your own breath. You are not restrained. Your thoughts are yours. But take with you gently the knowledge of what it means to break without breaking, to suffer not through injury, but through inevitability, to fall into madness, not from force, but from the slow certainty of time. Water wears away stone, and the mind, soft as spring soil, yields far quicker. Next time, we'll revisit the realm of steel, not dripping, but piercing. We will meet the pyre of anguish, a device of inward expansion, designed not to harm what others could see, but to wound the places they could not. But for now, rest. No drops fall tonight, only silence, only warmth and sleep. Welcome again, dear friend. The night is hushed tonight, blanketed in a softness that seems to muffle every sound. The candle flickers in its dish, casting a faint, golden arc upon the walls. Even the shadows are slow this evening, as if they, too, are reluctant to accompany us into what comes next. Because where we go tonight, the pain is hidden, the wounds are invisible, and the silence that follows is not peace, but shame. Tonight, we meet the pyre of anguish. Its name is almost poetic, isn't it? The image it conjures, soft fruit, gentle shape, is a cruel trick of language. For this pyre is no fruit, and its harvest is not nourishment. It is violation. It is control. It is the quiet unmaking of a person from the inside. Let us begin with its form. The pyre of anguish is a small device, shaped roughly like the fruit from which it takes its name, narrow at one end, bulbous at the other. But unlike any fruit, it is made entirely of iron or steel. At its core lies a screw mechanism, which, when turned, causes the device to open, petal-like, from within. The outer casing splits into 4 thick segments, widening outward in a slow, methodical bloom. And that, dear friend, is where its horror begins. For it was not meant to bloom in the light. It was meant to bloom inside you. There were different types. Some were made to be inserted into the mouth, for those who were said to speak lies, heresies, or forbidden truths. Others, more cruel, were made for the rectum or the vagina, used on those accused of sexual crimes, sorcery, or blasphemy. Once inserted, the screw was turned, slowly, deliberately. Each turn widened the device, expanding its petals. The result was not a dramatic rupture, not at first. Instead, it was pressure, stretching, tearing, crushing soft tissue from within. The pain was described as radiant, not in beauty, but in the way it spread outward from the center. There was no wound to bind, no blood to staunch, only the knowledge that something inside you had been undone. And when it was removed, if it was removed, what remained was not always whole. Let us imagine this together, gently. You are bound, seated perhaps, or suspended slightly. You do not know what you are accused of, only that the questioning has begun. The inquisitor does not shout. He simply produces the pyre, polished, cool, glinting in torchlight. You do not understand at first, not until you see the screw, not until you see it open, and then the fear begins. The device is coated in oil, not for mercy, but for function. It must slide in easily, must reach deep. There is no anesthetic, no distraction, just iron and silence. The insertion is the beginning. Then the screw turns. 1 click. You gasp. 2 clicks. your spine arches. 3. Clicks. You scream, but it is muffled, perhaps by the very same device lodged in your mouth. And yet the torturer continues. The idea was not always to kill. That was too quick, too merciful. It was to injure, to shame, to leave a person broken not just in body, but in the places no one would ever see. It was used especially on women. Midwives accused of witchcraft, young girls accused of tempting older men, wives accused of infidelity. The device entered where words had been denied. It punished the womb, the voice, the very symbols of femininity. That is why, dear friend, you would not last a day, because this is not pain meant for the battlefield, where adrenaline might shield you. This is pain meant to isolate, to shame, to make you fear even the memory of your own body. And there is something else, something colder. Many of these devices were decorated. Yes, some were carved with floral patterns, others etched with scripture. One surviving example bears the image of a saint, as if holiness could justify the unspeakable, as if beauty could mask the sin of such a thing. They were tools, but also statements, that not only could the body be punished, it should be that the soul might be purified through violation. It is said that in some monasteries the pyre was used for discipline, not execution. Monks who broke their vows, nuns who dared speak their minds. A click, a twist, a turning inward. The pyre did not need a crowd. It was intimate, personal, a secret that followed you the rest of your life. And afterward, few spoke of it. How could they? To admit the pain was to relive it. To explain the injury was to shame oneself anew. That silence, perhaps, was its greatest cruelty. Let us pause now. Let the breath return. Let the iron fade. Your body is whole. Your voice unchained. There are no screws tonight. No cruel bloom waiting in the dark. Only stillness, only safety. But let us remember what was done, and how easily cruelty can wear the mask of righteousness. Next time, we'll return to the realm of fire, but this time on the tongue itself. We'll explore tongue tearing, a punishment for blasphemy, treason, and truths spoken too freely. But for now, rest. You are not bound. You are not silenced. Sleep without intrusion. Dream without iron. Welcome once again, dear friend. The night is still and hushed, like the pause between words. The fire's glow is steady, casting warm halos onto old wood and soft blankets. There is comfort in this silence, because tonight we will explore a punishment that took that very silence and turned it into a sentence. Tonight we speak of tongue tearing, a punishment not of the body entire, but of one small, powerful muscle, the tongue. In the medieval world, your words could carry you further than your feet. A well-placed whisper might topple a noble. A sermon spoken without approval might brand you a heretic. A careless joke could be heard as sedition. And so, across the darkened towns and towering cathedrals of Europe, speech was not a right. It was a risk. When speech was viewed as dangerous, the punishment was not to bind the hands, but to silence the mouth. Let us begin with the sentence. 2. Be punished by tongue removal was to be accused of a crime of speech, blasphemy, treason, sorcery, seduction, slander. These were not merely violations of law, but of order. And in an era where divine hierarchy shaped every law and social custom, order was sacred. You did not need to shout rebellion. You only needed to mutter a wrong word in the wrong place to the wrong ear, and so the mouth became the enemy. The execution of this sentence varied across regions. Sometimes the tongue was merely pierced and torn. Sometimes it was fully removed. In some instances, a heated iron clamp would be used, fastened around the base of the tongue. Once tightened, the tongue swelled. Then came the blade. Or worse, the pull. Tearing it out was not efficient. But that was the point. The pain was meant to be witnessed, It was not simply punishment, it was ritual. Let us pause here. Let us imagine you are not a soldier, you are not a thief, you are a weaver's daughter, a merchant's apprentice. You spoke your mind, once, maybe twice. A sentence about taxes, a jest about the bishop, a prayer in a tongue, not sanctioned by the church. You are dragged before a wooden platform. No grand trial, no defense. The sentence is read, the clamp is brought forth, 2 men hold your arms, a third holds your jaw, the gag is removed. You are told not to scream. But what choice do you have? The iron is inserted. Your tongue is gripped. You try to breathe through your nose. You try not to move, but the metal is cold and foreign, and already you can feel the panic rising. Then, without fanfare, the executioner pulls. The tearing is not clean. It is not surgical. There is blood. So much blood. It pours over your chin, your chest. You try to cry out, but what emerges is no longer words, only sound. And that, dear friend, is what remains. Not pain alone, but a kind of disfigurement the soul cannot hide from. Because this is not just mutilation. It is erasure. Your voice is gone. Forever. That is why you would not last a day. Not because you cannot bear pain, but because you would feel yourself disappear, your identity severed, the bridge between thought and speech shattered. Some were left to bleed in the square, collapsing beside the block. Others were carried to prison, where infection festered, and their sentence was prolonged by fever and rot. There were alternatives, of course. For lesser offences, a hole might be driven through the tongue instead, and a hook inserted. The person was then led through the village square on a chain fastened to that hook, each step tearing the wound a little wider. In other cases, the tongue was nailed to a wooden post, forcing the speaker to remain still until the sentence ended, or until they tore themselves free. These punishments were not about retribution. They were about example, because if you saw someone bleeding at the mouth, if you heard their gurgled cries, you would think twice before speaking too freely. That was the aim. Not justice. Silence. In one recorded case from 15th century Spain, a travelling preacher who denounced a local priest's corruption had his tongue nailed to a gate. He survived, but never spoke again. His followers called him El Silencioso, not because he chose silence, but because it was chosen for him. And so we return to this truth. The tongue is a sacred thing, not for its form, but for what it carries: truth, laughter, love, prayer, protest. To lose it is to lose your place in the world. Many of those punished in this way lived, and that too was part of the cruelty. They returned to their villages altered, unable to speak or eating only through slurps and hand signals. Some were feared, others pitied. Few were ever again trusted, because silence too can be misread. Let us close our eyes now. Your tongue is intact. Your words are yours. You may speak or remain silent by choice. You do not bleed for having spoken. You are not chained to your own voice. And yet, let us not forget those who were. Next time, we will place our attention atop the shoulders, to the skull itself, where thought becomes agony beneath the tightening jaws of the head crusher. But tonight, may your voice carry only kindness. May your dreams be wordless, and your rest uninterrupted. Good evening again, dear friend. The fire tonight burns low but steady. Its quiet crackle echoes gently through the room, like the slow breathing of a trusted companion. Outside, all is still. The hour is late, and time itself seems to hesitate. Just long enough for one more descent into the shadows of the past. Tonight, we step into a device designed not for the body entire, nor the limbs or voice, but for the very seat of thought, for the skull, the face, the crown of human identity. This is the story of the head crusher. Of all the implements we've encountered, this may be one of the most direct in its design. There is no artistry here, no symbolic shape, no dual purpose. It was created for one reason only: to apply pressure to the human head until the skull gave way. Let us begin, as always, with what we see. The device is simple: a base, often wooden or iron, a vertical frame rising from it. At the bottom, a metal plate to rest the chin. At the top, another plate that lowers from a large screw, positioned directly above the skull. Between them, the head is placed. Once the victim is secured, arms bound behind, shoulders braced, the upper plate is turned, slowly, relentlessly, and with each turn, the pressure increases, not in sudden jolts, but in slow, grinding certainty. First, the jaw cracks, then the teeth shatter. The skull compresses, the eyes bulge, blood oozes from ears, nose, mouth. The brain, still conscious through much of it, begins to press against the inside of its own shell. Eventually, it can press no more. The skull gives. Let us pause there, because it is not only the destruction that makes this so dreadful, it is the knowledge, the awareness that your own mind, the part of you that thinks, remembers, dreams, is about to collapse. And yet, many who sat in the head crusher were not meant to die, at least not immediately. This device was used often for interrogation, not to punish, but to persuade. The victim would feel the first turns, just enough, to crack teeth or dislocate the jaw, and then the questions would begin. Answers were demanded between the clicks of iron, and many, of course, confessed. Not because they were guilty, but because they could feel their thoughts about to slip through the cracks in their own skull. Imagine it with me now. You are seated, not forcibly, but through guidance. You are not beaten into place. You are placed, like a tool in its slot. The metal is cool beneath your chin. The top plate rests lightly on your scalp. For a moment, it almost feels like a helmet. And then, the screw turns. It is not pain at first, just discomfort, then heat, then pressure. You are told to speak. You say you don't know. Another turn. Now your jaw aches. A strange taste fills your mouth, iron and salt. Another turn. Your teeth split like dry wood. Your ears ring. The pressure is behind your eyes now. You want to talk, to scream, but your mouth can no longer open. That is why, dear friend, you would not last a day, because this device turns the very thing that makes us, our thoughts, our decisions, into a battleground of grinding pain. Because even if your bones could endure, your mind would fracture first, not from the steel, but from the knowing that the end is inside your head. There are historical records, many grim and terse, of those interrogated in this way. Some survived, though rarely whole. Others died during questioning. Some had their skulls fully crushed, not as punishment, but as execution. One 16th century account tells of a merchant who resisted charges of heresy. The inquisitor had grown weary. The head crusher was prepared. The merchant held firm through 3 full turns. On the 4th, his right eye burst. He screamed, and the scribe recorded. He did confess in gasps, through shattered jaw. The brain did bleed. Not all were men of resistance. Some were simply accused, whispers of witchcraft. A prayer said in the wrong tongue. A letter never received. The evidence meant little once the screw began to turn. The cruel irony. This device was shaped like a crown, a frame arcing over the head, a ring of iron pressing down, a crown not of honor, but of unmaking. It was often displayed in courtrooms, sometimes left just in sight of the accused, a reminder, a threat. Speak now, or speak later, with blood in your throat and bone in your mouth. Let us step back. Let the screw stop turning. You are not bound. You are not clamped between iron jaws. Your mind is clear. Your thoughts are safe. But let us never forget the lesson the head crusher leaves behind. That fear has a pressure of its own. That there were days, whole centuries, when silence was not peace, but a slow, crushing command. Next time, we'll travel to the outer reaches of punishment, not for the accused alone, but for those outside the body. We'll meet the iron spider, a device forged for those accused of infidelity or impurity. But for now, rest. The crown has been lifted. Your skull is whole. Your dreams are free to wander, uncompressed. Welcome once more, dear friend. The hour is late, and the embers have begun their slow retreat into ash. The room feels heavier tonight, not with dread, but with reverence. For we approach now a punishment not designed to interrogate nor extract, but to mark. A sentence carved in flesh, forged in fire, and displayed before the eyes of all. Tonight, we speak of the iron spider. Unlike other devices we've encountered, tools of gears and racks, levers and screws, this was a punishment, more primitive, more visceral. It required no complexity of engineering, only the strength of iron, the intensity of flame, and the weight of judgment. The iron spider was not a mechanism. It was a message. Let us begin with its form. The spider itself took the shape of a flat, iron plate from which extended 4, 6, or sometimes 8 cruelly curved arms. These limbs did not resemble the delicate legs of the creature for which it was named. No, they were claws, barbed, jagged, forged to hook and tear. Often the tips were sharpened into crescents, honed not to pierce cleanly, but to rip. Once, heated in a roaring brazier, it became not just a tool of mutilation, but a living brand of shame, and it was almost always reserved for one particular crime: unfaithfulness, infidelity, adultery, carnal betrayal. But more often than not, it was a woman who faced the spider. Women accused, rightly or wrongly, of stepping outside the bounds of marriage, chastity, or silence. Wives, mistresses, sometimes even nuns. The spider was the executioner's reply to female desire. Let us imagine the setting. It is morning. The sky is grey. The village is quiet. Too quiet. Whispers have already spread from house to house, hearth to hearth. A woman is led into the square. Her hands are bound, her eyes swollen from weeping or from sleeplessness. She is barefoot. Her blouse has been torn open, exposing the canvas upon which her punishment will soon be painted. And there, glinting dull red in the brazier's glow, the iron spider waits. It is not swung, it is not slammed, it is pressed. Sometimes onto the chest, sometimes the breasts, sometimes the shoulder blades or the soft curve of the belly. Wherever it touches, it does not pierce deeply, but it clings. It draws flesh into its jaws, and then tears it free in long, irregular shreds. The woman cries out, or she doesn't. Some faint, some fight against their bindings. Others stare forward, not out of strength, but because their mind has fled long before the flesh is broken. The spider bites again, and with each stroke, the past is erased and replaced by pain. And yet, it is not the pain that defines the spider's legacy. It is the audience. You see, this punishment was almost always public. The spider was not a secret device hidden behind dungeon doors. It was brought to market squares, to courtyards, to the thresholds of chapels. Children watched, elders judged, husbands, sometimes the very accusers, stood and nodded in approval. The crime was not just betrayal, it was betrayal seen, and the sentence had to match. That is why, dear friend, you would not last a day. Not simply because of the searing pain, not only because of the flesh left dangling in strips, but because of the humiliation, because of the knowing, before it began, during its every moment, and long after it ended, that your body was no longer yours, that it had been made into a spectacle, your sin supposedly written in every wound. And when it was done, there was no healing. Oh, the skin might scar, but the life behind it was changed. Some were banished, others lived, but apart. Mothers forbidden to touch their children, wives forced to kneel before their husbands. servants returned to households, who now saw them as ruined. In one account from 15th century Bavaria, a miller's daughter was accused of enticing a priest to impure thoughts. The iron spider was used on her breasts. She survived, but she never again entered a church. She lived alone, and when she died, her body was buried at the edge of the village, half in holy ground, half out, because her soul, they said, was uncertain. And so too was the truth, because many of the women punished by the spider were not guilty at all. A jealous rival, a bitter husband, a mistaken identity. That was all it took. There was no trial that could undo the iron's kiss. The spider knew no justice, only heat and flesh. Let us step back now. Let the flames die down. Let the red glow fade. You are not in the square. You are not bound. Your body is untouched. Your name has not been dragged through mud and whispers. But remember this, punishment does not always wear the mask of justice. Sometimes it wears iron and smiles. Next time, we will move into the weight of slow suffocation, the press, where truth is flattened beneath stone and silence. But for tonight, rest. No claws reach for you, no brazier glows in the square, only warmth, only peace and sleep. Welcome again, dear friend. The night feels heavier than usual, not stormy, not restless, but heavy, as though the hours themselves carry something solemn across the still air. The fire doesn't crackle tonight, it murmurs, like a sigh beneath the breath of history, and in that hush, we arrive at one of the most quiet and crushing punishments of the medieval world. Tonight, we explore the press. It had many names. In Latin, pena forte e duro. In English, the strong and hard punishment. But most knew it simply as the press, because it did exactly that. Slowly, completely. It pressed the life out of those who refused to give the world their voice. You see, in many medieval courts, there was a rule. To be tried, you must plead. Guilty or not guilty, those were your choices. But if you refused to speak, if you denied the court its words, it was as though you denied it existence. And so, it responded by denying yours. Let us first see the device. There was no iron crown, no barbed hook, no rack of wheels, no artistry, just a board and stone. The condemned was laid on the ground, arms stretched, feet flat. A flat wooden door or heavy plank was placed across the chest. It wasn't tied, it simply rested. And then the stones began, large ones, sometimes slabs of granite or river rock. Others were scavenged from crumbling walls or nearby ruins. Each was placed slowly, with ritual care, one atop another, a slow funeral in reverse. This was not a punishment for blasphemy, nor for treason. It was for silence. You did not scream. You did not confess. You simply refused to play the part demanded of you. And so, the press made sure you had no part at all. Let us step closer. Imagine you are taken to a chamber, dark, unadorned. No onlookers here, just a priest, a scribe, a jailer, and two men with heavy hands. You are given one final chance. Plead. You do not speak, not from guilt, not from defiance, perhaps from principle, perhaps because you know that to plead guilty is to die a liar, and not guilty is to lend power to a system that will not hear you. And so, you are laid down. The board is placed. The first stone settles on your ribs. Its weight is light, almost thoughtful. You exhale, and then comes the second, and the third. By the fifth, your chest cannot rise easily. By the eighth, your bones begin to bend. The pain is not sharp, it is inevitable. And as the weight builds, you begin to feel something ancient, a slow panic that has no voice, because you cannot scream, not from restraint, but from compression. There is no blood, no fire, no screaming crowds. only your own breath diminishing. That, dear friend, is why you would not last a day. Not because the weight is unbearable, but because it asks nothing but time. It doesn't demand your confession. It doesn't twist or tear. It waits. It waits for your will to give in. And the truth is, almost everyone did. Some held out for hours, some for days. But eventually, under the weight of a dozen stones, something gives. Sometimes the ribs crack. Sometimes the heart fails. Sometimes the silence, which once gave you power, turns on you. Because silence becomes a sound of dying. In one documented case in 1586, a man named William Foster refused to enter a plea when accused of harboring enemies of the crown. He lay beneath the press for over 18 hours. By the end, his tongue had turned black. His eyes bulged. When asked once more if he would speak, he managed a single word. No. That was his last. There is another account, less known, but no less tragic, of a woman accused of petty theft. She refused to plead because to do so would mean condemning others. Her silence was not defiance, but protection. She died within 12 hours. No name was recorded, just the word, pressed. And in that, perhaps, lies the truest cruelty. The press didn't just kill, it flattened identity. No confession, no last words, just pressure. Until nothing remained but a broken form and a line in a ledger. Now, come back to this moment. Feel the lightness of your chest, the freedom of breath. You are not beneath a board. No stones rest upon you. You may speak or remain silent as you choose, and no consequence waits at your feet. But know this, not all who suffered did so because they were guilty. Some were simply quiet. And in a world that feared quiet more than rebellion, even stillness became a threat. Next time, we'll encounter a device made to punish slowly, vertically, a cruel combination of shame and gravity, the Judas cradle. But, for now, sleep gently. No weight presses on you here. Your silence is yours alone. And tonight, that is not a sentence. It is a sanctuary. Welcome again, dear friend. Tonight, the room feels oddly narrow, as though the very air leans in, cautious and listening. The flame dances gently, no longer crackling, but swaying, as if the world, too, recognizes that we are nearing the final chambers in our journey through shadows. And this evening, we arrive at a device born of simplicity and shame, a punishment that asks nothing of flame or blade, yet inflicted pain more deeply than either. Tonight, we meet the Judas cradle. Its name evokes betrayal, Judas, the betrayer of Christ. But this device did not betray from within. It welcomed the accused with open angles and a wicked point, using the weight of one's own body to do what ropes and whips could not. Let us begin, as always, by seeing it. The cradle was no cradle at all. It was a pyramid, tall, narrow, often made of polished wood or iron. The tip, smooth but sharp, rose vertically from a base. Around it, a frame or pulley system used to suspend the victim above. The condemned, usually naked, was hoisted into the air by a system of ropes tied to the wrists or ankles, then slowly, very slowly, lowered until their most sensitive regions came to rest upon the apex of the pyramid. They were not dropped, they were placed, gently, deliberately, inch by inch, and then the rope was secured. They were left to hang, the entire weight of their body pressing downward onto that one sharp point. This was not meant to kill quickly, nor even to bleed. It was meant to grind, to stretch. The muscles of the legs trembled first, then the pelvis burned. Over time, the skin tore, not with sudden gore, but with the steady insistence of gravity. Some remained there for hours, others for days, each moment longer than the last. Let us step into that moment together. You are stripped, not for search, but for spectacle. Your clothes, are not burned or cut. They are removed slowly, carefully, as part of the ritual. You are led to the frame in silence. No whip drives you forward, only the rope and shame. The pulley creaks. Your feet lift from the earth. The pyramid waits beneath you, and then you descend. The point meets you, not as a sword meets an enemy, but as a cold invitation. It does not pierce, not yet, but it claims. Slowly, it begins to enter, not with violence, but with inevitability. Your muscles tense. But there is no resistance. Resistance only worsens the pain. You try to breathe through it, but each breath shifts your balance. You try to scream, but the shame clogs your throat. You hang there between sky and floor, and time loses its meaning. That is why, dear friend, you would not last a day. Not because the pain is so quick, but because it is slow. Because it strips you of control, of modesty, of identity. It forces you to suffer through the simple act of being. Your weight, something you carried your whole life without thought, now betrays you with every second. And worse still, this was not always done in private. In some cases, the Judas cradle was a public punishment. Crowds gathered not for spectacle, but for lesson. This, they were told, is what happens to the impure, to the faithless, to the disobedient. The crime varied, sometimes heresy, sometimes homosexuality, sometimes adultery. But often it was defiance, refusing to confess, refusing to bend. So the body was bent for them. In Florence, a young scholar was accused of impiety. He would not renounce his writings. They lowered him for 3 hours. He confessed everything, but the scars never closed. He bled internally for days before death claimed what the pyramid had started. In another case, a midwife was accused of practicing dark magic. She was suspended for a full day, allowed to drink nothing. She lived, but never walked upright again. The Judas cradle, you see, punished in layers. There was the physical pain, the tearing, the splitting, the bruising. But beneath that was the humiliation, the exposure, the helplessness, the sense that your very self had been reduced to anatomy, suspended like meat in a butcher's stall. Even if you survived, you did not return. Not truly. That pyramid lived beneath your skin forever. Some of the cradles were made of iron, others of hardwood, stained and worn from use. Some were washed, others not. Infection followed as surely as dawn. And yet the tool remained in use for centuries. Why? Because it worked. It did not need to kill. It simply needed to break. The Judas cradle offered no quick exit, no fatal stroke. It gave the accused the opportunity to decide, how long will I endure this before I speak? And many answered quickly. Let us step back now. The pyramid fades. The ropes loosen. The floor returns beneath your feet. You are not suspended. You are not watched. You are not undone. Tonight, your weight is your own, and it bears down not on pain, but on pillows and warmth. Next time, we will journey to the edge of civilization, to the soaring punishment, where the body is cleaved in halves not for justice, but for spectacle. But for now, let your breath be steady. Let your spine rest soft. And know this. No one waits to pull the rope. No one waits to lower you. You are safe. Sleep well. Welcome back, dear friend. Tonight, the night leans long against the walls, and the silence it brings is not a peaceful one, but a waiting one. A hush before thunder, a stillness before memory. The fire before us dances only slightly, as though it too hesitates. Because this evening, we approach perhaps the most brutal form of punishment ever whispered through the chambers of medieval justice. Tonight, we speak of sawing. Of all the methods of torture and execution devised by man, few match the sheer dread, the cold spectacle of this one. It required no castle forge, no intricate devices, no divine sanction, only a blade, a body, and time. Let us begin with its nature. Sawing was not a punishment for the common thief, nor the impulsive speaker. It was reserved, so they said, for the gravest of sins, high treason, religious apostasy, sorcery, and rebellion. And like all punishments of display, its true purpose was not to end life, but to warn the living. The condemned was not laid on a block. They were hung, inverted, suspended by the ankles, their head dangling just above the earth, blood pooling toward the skull. This position, strangely deliberate, ensured that the victim remained conscious for as long as the body could withstand it. And from below came the saw. It was a simple two-man blade, long, curved or straight. Teeth honed not for precision, but for pulling. The process began between the legs. Yes, between the legs, and with slow, methodical movements, the blade travelled upward, through pelvis, abdomen, ribcage. There was no rush. This was not a matter of execution, but of instruction. The body, split from groin to chest, became a lesson etched in bone and blood. And in that agony, the condemned became more than mortal. They became spectacle. Let us imagine, gently, this moment. You awaken not on the floor, but hanging. Your hands reach for the sky, but they touch nothing. Your head throbs with the rush of blood. Your lungs feel heavy, inverted, and then you hear it. That first scrape. It begins not with agony, but with the cold realization. There is no escape, no fainting, no plea, just the bite. The blade finds flesh, then muscle, then bone, and you feel it all. The movement is not continuous. It is rhythmic, a back and forth, a deliberate sawing motion, like a carpenter on wood. Except this time, it is you. And the men wielding the blade are not angry. They are not cruel. They are employed. They do their duty. And you? You are silent until you are not. That is why, dear friend, you would not last a day. Not because your body could not endure it, though few could, but because of what the punishment asks of its witness. To be sawed alive was not just to be killed. It was to be turned into a warning. Your suffering was a script written in red, played out before the eyes of neighbours, strangers, children. And, for the condemned, there was nowhere to go but open. Sawing was practiced across regions and religions. In medieval Europe, it was used against heretics and dissenters. In parts of the Ottoman world, against traitors. In feudal Asia, against nobles who defied emperors. And always, there was a crowd. Sometimes jeering, sometimes silent, sometimes praying, but always watching. One account from 15th century Hungary tells of a young man accused of seducing a noble's wife. He was sentenced not by court, but by decree. The saw was brought at dawn. By noon, it had reached his chest. He was alive for most of it. The noble's wife was forced to watch. Elsewhere, a group of monks in France recorded the punishment of a woman they claimed had practiced moon rites. She was hung from a gallows tree and sawed until her body split to the navel. They recorded her final moments not with remorse, but with precision. Her eyes remained open until the rib was touched. That line, chilling in its clarity, remains in the margins of a manuscript still preserved today. The pain of sawing is unimaginable, but the fear it instilled was its true design. For long after the blood dried, the memory remained, and the lesson was clear. Some things are not forgiven. And what of the saw itself? It was not a ceremonial blade. Often it was borrowed from woodcutters, builders, craftsmen, its teeth dulled with repeated use. Sometimes it was cleaned between executions. Often it was not. Infection, of course, never had time to set in. The condemned rarely lived long enough. But the crowd, they lived. They carried the story home. They whispered it in kitchens. Children dreamed of it in nightmares. And so, the saw's sharpness was never truly in the steel, but in the minds of those who feared it. Let us leave that image now. let us draw the curtain gently over the blade, the rope, the blood-streaked soil. You are safe. You are whole. Your body is not hanging, and no one waits beneath you, and that too is something to hold close. Next time, dear friend, we come to the final flame, burning at the stake, where belief met fire, and smoke rose with prayers and screams alike. But now let your breath slow. Let your legs rest gently, unmoved. There is no saw here, only stillness, only sleep. Good evening, dear friend. This is the final chapter of our journey. The firelight tonight feels older, more reflective than fierce. It no longer dances but glows, as if mourning the stories we've unearthed. There is stillness in the room, like a cathedral after the last hymn has faded, like the final hush before dawn. And tonight, in that stillness, we arrive at the most iconic and symbol-laden punishment of the medieval world, burning at the stake. Of all the tortures we've explored, those that tore, crushed, ripped and pierced, this one held a different kind of power. It was not designed to wound the body alone. It was aimed at the soul. It was theatre, punishment, ritual, and warning all at once. Let us begin with the scene. The stake was usually placed in a central square, a monastery courtyard, or on a raised hill just beyond the town. It was tall, upright, unadorned. Around it, bundles of dried wood were piled in a careful ring, hay for kindling, logs for longevity. The condemned, often barefoot and stripped to a simple shift, was led through crowds not in silence, but in song. Bells tolled, processions formed. Sometimes clergy walked alongside, urging confession with every step, and all the while the wood waited. The crimes? Heresy, witchcraft, apostasy. But in truth, the stake was most often reserved for those who spoke in ways the world could not accept. For women who healed outside the church's gaze, for scholars who questioned too deeply, for prophets with no papal seal. You see, this punishment was not just about the body, it was about belief, and to challenge belief was to invite fire. Let us now step into that moment, slowly, gently. You are brought before the pyre. The wood smells faintly sweet, oak and dried rosemary. A strange kindness in the air, though no kindness waits. Ropes bind your wrists behind you. Another is drawn around your waist, anchoring you to the post. The crowd is already gathered. They have not come to jeer, not always. Some are silent. Some whisper prayers. Some clutch children to their side and tell them not to look. And then, the question is asked, will you repent? If you do, you may be strangled first. A rope drawn tightly around your neck before the fire is lit. A mercy. But what if you believe in what brought you here? What if the truth inside you burns brighter than any pyre? Then you speak softly. No, the torch touches the straw, and the flames begin. They start low, licking at your feet, teasing the hem of your garment. You feel the heat, not pain at first, but promise. Your skin tightens, your breath grows sharp, then it climbs, up your calves, your thighs. The scent of burning fabric gives way to something more ancient, searing flesh, curling hair. The flames find the soft places first, the stomach, the underarms, the neck. You try to cry out, but the heat is too fast, or too slow. The sound is lost, and the crowd watches. That is why, dear friend, you would not last a day, because burning at the stake is not the pain alone, it is the isolation, the absolute vulnerability of being exposed, not just to fire, but to judgment, of standing in front of the world and being reduced, not by sword or blade, but by elemental silence. The fire does not rage, it consumes, and the ashes it leaves behind are not swept away, but remembered. History is thick with stories like this. In 1431, Joan of Arc stood at the stake. She was only 19. The crowd saw a heretic, but her final words were, "Jesus, Jesus." After the fire died, The executioner scattered her ashes in the Seine to prevent her relics from becoming holy. It was an act of control, and yet her memory outlived the flame. Others were not saints. They were mothers, healers, midwives, thinkers. Women accused of witchcraft in Würzburg, or men who translated scripture without permission in Oxford. All brought to the stake. All burned not because of what they had done, but because of who they chose to be. The fire made no distinction, but the records did. One scribe in 15th century Rouen wrote of a woman named Isabeau, burned for moon rites and knowledge of herbs. He described how her eyes remained open until the fire reached her chest. She did not scream, he wrote, only stared at the bell tower. Even in death, she reached for the sky. The fire was not always final. Sometimes the body was reburned, reduced to ash entirely, to prevent martyrdom. Sometimes the bones were scattered in rivers, so no place of pilgrimage could form. But the memory, that could not be burned. And now, we return to this room. The hearth glows softly. Your hands are not bound. Your voice is your own. Your beliefs are not judged. You are safe, and yet it is worth remembering. There were times when the world feared not crime, but conviction, when ideas could lead to fire, when truth became tinder. Tonight, we honor those who stood before the stake, not because they were perfect, but because they dared to stand at all. And now, dear friend, our long walk through the shadows comes to its close. From racks to cradles, presses to saws, we have not glorified horror, but witnessed it, gently, respectfully, and most of all, together. Your mind is heavier now, perhaps, but your heart is wiser. Let the fire burn low. Let your thoughts soften. There is no stake outside your door, only sleep, only quiet, only the warmth of knowing that you are still here, and that history remembers.